Details of a second stimulus package could be revealed this Tuesday. Hey everybody, this is LALATE with a second stimulus check and stimulus package update for today. Our first of 3 videos with shocking news about what's going to happen on Tuesday about a stimulus package, and amazing, incredible news about labor numbers from Thursday. Thanks for joining us. This is LALATE. Tuesday will be a big day. On that day, Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary for the White House, and Jerome Powell, head of the Federal Reserve, will testify before members of a House committee. And it's during that testimony that many believe that the White House will finally detail more about their position about a second stimulus check package. What's at issue here, and this is very important, it was detailed on this channel yesterday, is that, yes, you all know that members of Congress have inherent authority to provide stimulus checks, to provide stimulus packages. But so too does the White House, and so too does the Federal Reserve. Earlier this week, this channel detailed that the Federal Reserve allocated an enormous amount of money, in the billions of dollars, for corona relief, and that only a percentage of that money has been used to date. The Federal Reserve, when questioned about this, Jerome Powell specifically said, hey, he does not need congressional approval to issue stimulus packages and can do it under the enhanced authority, the actual authority of the Federal Reserve's charter agreement. The Treasury also has inherent authority. So what could happen? Well, we know little about where the White House's position is as of this day. We know where it was a few weeks ago and earlier last week. Let's recap. Earlier last week, the Trump administration, namely the president himself, said, we will be doing another stimulus package, quote. It will include a focus on manufacturing jobs, infrastructure spending, payroll tax credit, and return to work bonus and other related incentives detailed below. Now, that was last week. Earlier in the month, Larry Kudlow, who I'm going to detail in a second, who is really out of left field and really not focused at the moment, said that we need to focus less on rescue and more incentive. This is during an interview, which I'm going to be getting to shortly. And I do think that Larry Kudlow, who's often been seen as behind the 8 ball, late on getting to some of these points, is going to reverse his decision. Let's get to, though, the shocking news, which is more impetus for an emergency second stimulus package. Thursday, new data. What was it? Here you go. The Department of Labor, DOL, released new labor numbers, and the labor numbers warrant a second stimulus package ASAP. Here they are. For the 14th consecutive week, unemployment claims surpassed 1 million new first-time unemployment claims. Now, while unemployment actually fell by 1.4% in May, and I'll get to that in a second, the most recent figures show that unemployment in the United States stands at 13%. This is compared to 3.5% before the pandemic. 13% is horrific. Now, what I'm going to jump forward before going into the minutia of this is what happened yesterday. On Friday, 45,000 new coronavirus cases were confirmed in the United States. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean that there are people who are now infected with COVID-19. It means there's 45,000 people now unemployed. When a person, actually, it could actually mean double. As you know, when a person contracts COVID-19, they can't work. Moreover, most of the time, the loved ones that work with them also can't work. There are studies that have been released in the last 24 hours that reveal that when one person in a household contracts COVID-19, it just sort of snowballs. But what's at issue here is that when a person contracts COVID-19, or as I'm going to detail in a second, 5% rise of COVID-19 cases in several states per day this week alone. With this enormous rise of COVID-19 cases, you have to have a second stimulus package now. You can't wait to August. You can't wait to September. You can't wait to October. Why? Because COVID-19 cases push the unemployment numbers. Let me explain very simply what we're talking about. This coming Thursday, there's going to be a big new number. What is it? It's the June unemployment numbers. Now, Larry Kudlow, who I'm going to get to in a second, is really off the chain because he's talking about how wonderful the May numbers were. Well, we all know the June numbers are not going to be good. Why? Because, first of all, we see DOL's numbers from Thursday that shows 1 million unemployment first-time claims per week for the 14th consecutive week. Second, we see this upsurge of COVID-19 cases, which aka is new unemployed individuals. So with that, it shows the urgency of a second stimulus package. What are we looking at and what numbers are we talking about? Let me go over them with you. First, there is the federal plan, the Fed. There is the potential of an emergency order from the White House, and then there's the congressional elements. As you know, the Democrats in the House passed the HEROES Act. And the HEROES Act called for a certain number of things. Let me go over them right away really quickly. $1,200 second stimulus check to come to every household, every individual in a household. And it expands who gets stimulus checks as well. $13 hazard pay on top of the normal hourly rate for essential workers, and essential workers is an issue of debate. The extension of the $600 per week of FPUC, which expires in July, extending it into January. Extension of loan forgiveness, extension of student debt repayments, whether it's principal or interest, into January 2020. A lot of other things, including $2,500 for what is also part of the discussion was $2,500 for Uber and Lyft drivers and misclassifications, those type of things. But with that HEROES Act, and I've sort of hit this home a lot lately in the channel, I want you to understand that that is not the only discussion. What's going on is that when that landed in the Senate, the number of COVID cases in the United States was totally different. It was totally different. And at that time, the reaction was that from Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, he called it an unserious product of an unserious majority. Well, the situation is serious now, Mitch, because 45,000 new corona cases have been confirmed just yesterday, and it's growing every single day. Republicans at that time, and I want to go over this very slowly with you, Republicans at that time favored work bonuses and as opposed to actual stimulus checks. Now, when I say Republicans, it was really just Mitch McConnell. But a CNBC report detailed that that was what could be called not necessarily logically thought through, is basically how they phrased it. The Chicago Federal Reserve also slammed Mitch McConnell's approach to it. The reason why was because essentially people don't have jobs to go back to work, or that people may be COVID-19 infected. Well, that was several weeks ago when Mitch McConnell made those remarks. Here's the situation now. COVID-19 cases are rising. Several states are going back in phases of lockdown. As you know, when Mitch McConnell made that statement, there was sort of this happiness from Mr. McConnell, Senator McConnell, about how many stages had opened in the United States. Well, states are now reverting and going back and closing certain businesses and industries that they had opened at the time when Mitch McConnell made those statements. Rob Portman's plan, which he's a Republican from Ohio, proposes a $450 per week additional for people who went back to work through July 31st. Now, that's not going to work either. And I'll tell you why, because July 31st is really not a sensible date. The Portman plan is to propose money for people who go back to work as an incentive. He understands that people who go back to work won't have enough jobs, won't have enough hours, may not make enough money, and that he wanted to supplement it for the base salary. The Brady plan, which I unfortunately sometimes call Bradley, my apologies. The Kevin Brady plan, he's a Republican out of Texas, would pay $600 in enhanced benefits or $1,200, but only to the July 31st. No one thinks that July 31st works. And here is the reason why this is sort of crazy. You have these dates that are coming up, And these dates are very, very close together. FPUC, the $600 from the federal government, expires in late July. Mortgage forbearance expires in late July. There are certain items, whether it is, state budgets that are due are their new annual cycle starts in July. So there's so many things happening at the same time that if you wait for members of Congress to come back in late July, that these dates will have elapsed. That these services, that these industries, that these people won't get the money that they need. And that the best case scenario, even under that environment, is that those programs would get a relief on August 8th. This channel has detailed basically you will see a congressional second stimulus package approved by August 8th. Why do I say that? Is because members of Congress come back in late July from their stupid vacation they're taking now. They work for a few darn days. They pass the stimulus package because they have to do it by August 8th. And then they go on vacation again for, a gazillion other weeks. So we have a finite timeline for their stimulus package, but that's not going to cut it. What we're talking about here is all these things coming up at the same time. Matt Weidinger, who's a Rowe Fellow at the Poverty Studies, says that giving back to work bonuses would not necessarily work because a lot of people, one, can't go back to work, and two, there may not be a place to go back to work. And his comments were made now after Larry Kudlow, after Steve Mnuchin's comments, after the White House's comments, as we saw COVID-19 cases rise. Let's look a little bit more in detail about what we're talking about. Larry Kudlow, early in the month, remember this is early in the month, before COVID-19 cases were bad, at the horrible rate that they are now, before we had states reverting back to earlier phases and going back to certain lockdowns, Larry Kudlow said earlier this month that the $600 FPUC, that weekly $600 from the federal government, which expires in late July, is not a good thing because it would be paying people not to work and they would have a disadvantage to going back to work. Well, you know why Larry Kudlow's comments now are highly dated and out of touch based upon current numbers is because more people are infected by COVID-19. Unemployment numbers are rising. States are now reverting back to lockdowns. And so those businesses, those jobs are no longer going to be there, Mr. Kudlow, the coming weeks. Let's go more into this. So Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, said a few days ago, this is more recent than Larry Kudlow, that we're talking about a bunch of different ideas for a stimulus package, a stimulus check. We may need to do another bill. We want to take our time and make sure it's thoughtful. That's not going to be Steve Mnuchin's point next week, and I'll tell you why. There's a sense of urgency here. There's a sense of urgency that waiting and taking our time is not going to cut it. So whatever we'll do will be more targeted, more focused on jobs, bringing back jobs, and make sure we're taking care of our kids. Jobs and talking about jobs is not necessarily where the focus needs to be at the moment, because you have to focus on three different factors. 1, unemployment numbers, 2, consumer confidence, and 3, liquidity. And Steve Mnuchin understands that, and that's why Tuesday's hearing is so darn important. You don't have jobs if states are starting to revert back and close certain doors. 2, you don't have jobs if people are infected by COVID-19 at increasing scary rates. 3, you don't have jobs if the businesses can't afford to operate. A lot of these businesses are dependent upon certain items like rent moratoriums, which I haven't even gotten to. Rent moratoriums expire generally, depending on the municipality, in the next couple of weeks. If you don't have them, they're not going to exist. So when you couple all these things together along with consumer confidence, you have a very big concern. There were 45,255 new COVID cases on Friday. That brings the total number of cases in the United States to 2.46 million cases, the Johns Hopkins data says. It shows that the U.S.'s 7-day average of cases is increasing more than 41% week to week. I mean, this is quite horrible. When the HEROES Act was approved by the Democrats, before it went to a vote, there was talk of 6 $2,000 checks. 6 $2,000 checks at minimum, and those $2,000 checks continuing until unemployment rates drop. Now, now the HEROES Act almost looks dated as well, because the HEROES Act, as approved by the House, Democrats, calls for a single $1,200 check. No one believes in their right mind that this economy will survive if you have COVID-19 cases increasing, if you have unemployment rising, and that all you're giving is a $1,200 check. Why? Because all analysts say that the $600 weekly benefit, the FPUC, is absolutely needed, because all these people are going to become unemployed in the coming weeks because of COVID-19 cases are rising. They can't work. And that no one can survive on a $136 check from their local state. Moreover, states can't afford to keep on paying these checks. Federal government can't. Federal government can write money, can print money, and finance it by issuing T-bonds and things like that. There are more there are more cases, there are more hospitalizations in those places, and soon you'll be seeing more deaths, says Anthony Fauci, just this Friday. Even though the deaths are coming down as a country, this doesn't mean you're not going to start seeing them coming up now. I mean, we're not even talking about deaths. We're just talking about infection rates. White House on Friday said if there's one message that comes through today, it's going to say young Americans need to protect themselves and not be doing what they're doing. Well, the undercurrent of that remark is not going to businesses that should not have been open in phase 4. And that's essentially what it means. Now, let me show you how the entire microcosm, the entire debate, the entire focus of the White House has really changed in the last 30 days. Here you go. Earlier this month, before COVID-19 cases were rising, before unemployment numbers were absolutely getting out of control again, Larry Kudlow appeared on Jake Tapper. And as you know, Larry Kudlow is the director of Economic Council. He says, well, unemployment numbers will not stop in August. Before I get to the minutia, the details of the comments, Larry Kudlow was basically proclaiming that, hey, we're going to have a V. You know the importance of that V? The V is the claim that, hey, this was a short-term pandemic. Everything's going to rebound, and we're going to be back to normal in June as we were in February. We're not. We're absolutely not. But this is what Larry Kudlow said earlier in the month. Well, understand the $600, the FPUC, plus up, that's among the state unemployment benefits, they'll continue to receive it, is in fact a disincentive. I mean, we're paying people not to work. It's better that their salaries would get. It's better than their salaries they would get. And they might not have worked for a couple of months. It'll end in late July. I think that we're returning to employment. We are in the administration. The president's looking at a reform measure that will still provide some kind of a bonus for returning to work. Tell you why that comment's not going to work anymore. And I don't think Steve Mnuchin's going to co-sign that remark either. The point is that the jobs aren't there. Jobs are going to start laying off. Jobs are going to start start furloughing people once again. COVID-19 cases are rising. So there is that sort of group that was Kudlow-ish in the White House that thought, okay, unemployment numbers are going to go so great by June that we weren't going to have to extend FPUC. That's not happening. So when you see these unemployment numbers, the June jobs report on Thursday, when you see Steve Mnuchin and the Federal Reserve testifying on Tuesday, they're all going to have that Department of Labor number from Friday and from Thursday last week that shows that jobless rates are unemployment claims are 1 million for the 14th week, which is absolutely horrible. Then unemployment numbers are 13% now. That COVID-19 cases are rising at 4% in incredible numbers. But Kudlow earlier this month says unemployment insurance, the weekly numbers, Jake, are falling 10 consecutive weeks. No, they aren't, Larry. So I think we're on our way. We're reopening, and the businesses are coming back. Not happening. In fact, it's absolutely not happening. As you know, overnight, Texas, Arizona, Florida started to revert back. Earlier today, CNN, a doctor in Texas, praised the Texas governor for reverting back one of the stages, but said, hey, I think we need to go back to phase one, or stage one, whatever you call them, and said, hey, I don't think that going back one stage or phase is enough at this point. Larry Kudlow early in the month said, you have this Apple Mobility Index that practically pre-pandemic that shows people are traveling all over the place. Absolutely untrue. Totally untrue. The airline industry has actually shown quite the opposite than what Kudlow was saying. So when Kudlow is saying, I think they're welcoming back the reopening economy, however, the margin, the incentives do not matter, I think all these comments are going to be very dated. And I do think that the White House is going to walk them back because basically at this point, they are not consistent with what's going on. As Kudlow said, the efficient distribution of emergency rescue funds, that's the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, as you know. There you go. You have coming up next week so many things, and you have these deadlines. And unless these deadlines are sort of focused on, which I really do think they are, you're going to have an implosion. What you're talking about here is FPUC going away in late July. You have all these things like loan forbearance, the loan repayments, which is sort of on a moratorium. Fannie and Freddie Mae, if you have a mortgage with Fannie and Freddie Mae, the repayment is a moratorium to July. Student debts on a moratorium to July. All these things are late July. And we haven't gotten to the real core, which is the U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen has been waiting around for these stimulus checks since April. If you're new to this channel, thank you for joining. I mean, we're adding 1,000 new subscribers per week. But this channel has been deeply critical that the stimulus check that you received was for the month of March. You haven't received a check for the month of April. You haven't received a check for the month of May. You haven't received a check for the month of June. Marco Rubio early this week proposed another stimulus package that would give you retroactive benefits, but only for people who are omitted from the first stimulus package. The problem and the concern is that if you don't get these stimulus checks, if you don't get this infusion of benefits, whether it comes from the Congress in late July, it comes from the White House by emergency order, it comes from the Federal Reserve from its pool of funds that has already allocated, has not even used, then you're going to see a real big problem come late July. I do think that Steve Mnuchin and Jerome Powell really understand that you can't wait around, and that the comments that they may have said a month ago, the comments that Larry Kudlow may have said a month ago, are now very dated. Let me get to some of your 210 second stimulus check questions to yesterday's video, which got over 1,000 likes. Really wonderful. I can't cover them all, but let me do a few of them. Wicked Willows. The president has the power to call houses into session under Article 2, Section 3. If he deems it an emergency, most houses reopen. Very well said. Donnie Beard. Retroactive payments and monthly payments until it's over. It's not our fault. Very well said. Cressy. They need to extend the $600 a week for the federal government benefit immediately to reduce people's stress levels. Triad. Absolutely too little, too late. Political. We can show Congress and the Senate how ridiculous they have been. Vote them out. Kevin Lee. We definitely need the $2,000 a month ASAP. Sing Dance. I hope you're right. Someone said I quoted MSNBC. I never quote MSNBC. CNBC. Sheila. U.S. North Carolina. Need for a second stimulus check. Bob Gabriel. Florida is banning all bars from selling alcohol today. Florida. Texas. Miami announced it's closing. It may close beaches for 4th of July. We're also, and in California, Gavin Newsom said he is considering going back a phase. It's all going to move very quickly in the next couple of days. Big D Zone. The president needs to send money now. Ernest. The United States should be taking care of the people. Anaja. I need help now. Paula. I've always advised people, don't waste your stimulus check or invest it. Jasmine, the Federal Reserve is propping up the stock market. M. Saucedo, Cabbage is helping. I don't know if I agree with that. Paul Ryan. A new stimulus package proposal for me to begin. The first part would be the removal of Mitch McConnell from office. I love that. Harvey. Give that unemployment the extra $600 a week and the direct deposit payments of $2,000 for at least 6 months to the other citizens. Very well said. Rob asks, the resulting depression from unrealized hope is inherently dangerous. Jeff, the hero stimulus package is the only common sense that's been offered. No, I totally disagree. I don't think $1,200 as a single check is sensible. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's totally ridiculous. Political Lil, I love the show. Thank you. Dinosia, who cares where it's coming? If we get it, we get the amount. Very well said. Jeffrey, tell me the government wanted to control us. Christian, look forward to hearing you on a daily basis. Well, thank you. Heartfelt, way to go, LALATE. Fastest updates. Well, thank you. Raymond Hunter, what about child support? I don't think that's really in the microcosm of where they are. Shanna Shans, they say July 25th for the ending of the 600 boost. Texas tells you ahead of time. Samuel Oldsby, we finally got our EIDL. Amelia says it ain't a W, it ain't a V, it's going to look like a Nike logo, more like an L. I love that. Virginia, they always say everyone comes back, and they say if you're carried as a dependent, you don't qualify for the stimulus. How is that helping the elderly? Very well said. Roy Hines, what about the dead? They're getting checks. We detailed that earlier this week. Really quite horrible. It's fortunes, millions and millions of dollars of first stimulus checks went to dead people. Okay, so where is the money now? Has it been returned? Is it back into the Treasury? Is it being allocated for the second stimulus checks? We really don't know. I like your explanation more and your positive spirit, Maritas. Well, thank you. Miriam, I'm so glad I found you. I learned a lot from hearing you and love the birds. There's no birds today, but maybe in the next video. Juanita, thank you for all the important updates. Well, thank you. Jerry, how about the people who work all their lives and paid Social Security? Now they can't get any help. Very well said. Paul Ryan, airlines shouldn't sell the middle seat. They should throw it out of the plane. Leela, it's about time we're trying to find a way to get our businesses going now. Stanley, this is good news. LaRae, what are they going to do if they don't hurry up? I mean, this timeline is critical, LaRae. You know, July, all these things are expiring literally in the week that Congress comes back into session. Congress should never have gone out of session. Congress should be in session and getting a second stimulus package done now. We shouldn't have to be having the Federal Reserve invoke their authority, the Treasury invoke their authority, the President invoking his authority. We shouldn't have to deal with that. Congress is elected to do exactly what is needed now, and all they are doing is putting their feet in a jacuzzi in the Bahamas. Rose, my husband's a caregiver. Ruben, I like all your comments, and thank you for this update. Well, thank you. We have 2 others coming up later today. Dawn, we need the legs off their thrones. Janet, why are they saying people are going back to work? I've been laid off. I mean, it's very well said. Larry Kudlow keeps on talking about people going back to work. People are not going back to work. Jobs are closing. Apple closed all these stores this week. Department stores are closing. Businesses are going bankrupt. I don't know what Larry Kudlow needs to wake up. Governors are closing types of businesses left and right in the last 48 hours. Now, I will freely admit, again, Larry Kudlow's remarks were early in the month, but, I mean, really, come on now. Ethel, I believe it when we see the checks. Well, let's hope for it. David Kramer, thank you for all the updates. Annette, hey, you go on a vacation for 1 week, and within 2 weeks, you're dead. So where's the stimulus package for that? You tell me. Very well said. Bob, start a movement for term limits. I agree. Rowan, another awesome broadcast. Purdy Shirt. Robin, truly appreciate you. The Afflicted, they're going to have to do $2,000 a month and $600 for unemployment for the people. Very well said. Deborah, how do they get a vacation while we are on lockdown? It's really quite disturbing. If you have questions to today's video, drop them in the comments below, and we may feature them in tomorrow's update. There was a lot of comments in yesterday's video, so sorry I can get to all of them. Coming up later today, 2 other really shocking second stimulus check videos. One about PUA and really what is going on with that FPUC deadline coming up in July. And second, what some states are doing to put money in your hands in the form of a second stimulus payment. As always, save LA for more.